Who knows what the the deal was with that? We got like a not a takedown, but a nudge saying, "Hey, please don't use this song," which we talked to. But yeah, we should be good now.
By who? By Twitch?
It's totally fair use, by the way.
Yeah, we'll deal with it in a little bit. But yeah, hey, welcome to Thugcrowd.
Yo.
You just got that feedback.
Hey, Debug, you need to turn your mic down. You're echoing everybody.
No, this is badass. I like this.
Everybody's got some really deep voices.
I got your cat.
Sweet. So, hey, everybody, welcome to Thugcrowd. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to be live with our pal Esquiring, aka Twitter's lawyer, is that what README called him? Infosec lawyer. He's going to be talking about new laws, current cases, and just what they kind of mean for the hacker community in general. So it's really cool, and we were able to do a lot of questions. So if you have anything that you wanted to hypothetically ask about your hypothetical someone who isn't you totally can today. So yeah, but now that we're here at the top of the hey, Esquiring. Hi.
Hey.
Let me
Word up.
One second. You got tea cooking back on there?
It sounds like you got tea.
So we are doing a badge giveaway today, and the address for the badge giveaway is actually, I'll preface it again. This is a puzzle that we're doing, and the puzzle is just if you solve it, you're the first person to solve it and find the correct thing that you need to that says what to do. All the instructions are included in the puzzle. But yeah, so everybody here, I'll put it in the chat for both channels, and let's see if I can actually do that, because I think that they might not let me on YouTube. We'll see. So yeah, okay, there we go. We're good. So yeah, this is the puzzle. First person to finish it, just let us know. You'll see when you solve it. So we'll give the whole stream to do that. And let me see if I can pull up a picture real quick of it, because we had talked to Bond before about the what's it called? Oh, where did it go? Great. Yeah, I do not have a picture of the badge right now, but I'm gonna try to pull it up on the stream. So if someone wants to say something.
It's on the Thugcrowd.
Twitter, right? And Thugcrowd.
Hold on, I'm trying to say this. I don't want to take large.
It's not yet. N0TY3P on Twitter. She has a bunch of pictures of it.
Yeah, it is. Here we go. Oh my god, this is taking up the entire screen.
We're doing it live.
Yep. All right. So this is what you will win if you solve the puzzle. And it is a DEF CON badge that we are going to give away at DEF CON. And it is what's it called? Like it's an IoT lab. There's a bunch of different inputs and outputs on it. It's all handmade, and this is a prototype one that she has now. They're handmade, BGA soldered insanity. It's a really cool circular OLED screen, and there's a rechargeable thing on the back for it. And there's a bunch of different inputs and outputs. It's really, really awesome. I'm excited to see what it actually looks like, but she will be releasing them at DEF CON. So we will have the badges at DEF CON, and if you win the contest and you are not available to be at DEF CON, then we can figure out a way to send it to you. But yeah, so we're really excited about this, and
yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
One by one pixel right now.
What?
The badge image is a 1x1 pixel at the moment.
What do you mean? It's
I don't know. It's on the stream though. On the Twitch
oh
stream,
yeah.
the
So
YouTube
that
stream.
badge.gif, that's the puzzle. So you grab that URL and
Go for
hack
it.
away. Just hack him, bro.
Figure it
All I
out.
can-
Get good.
All I can say is having a quick look. There's some nice garden paths.
Yeah. We're, yeah.
So what were you gonna say, Dan?
Nothing. No.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So let's get into the news that we got. So there's some interesting things that we've seen this week. One of them I didn't actually mention, which MG, if you want to talk about later, that'd be awesome. And I'll post the show notes as well, so that everybody who's at home can follow along. Boom. Cool. All right. So the first thing we have here is the NetSpectre attack, which is we saw this recently, and I was reading the white paper about it, and it was interesting, but it's not as practical as you would think it would be. But it's still really cool. Basically, it's doing Spectre attack on the network drivers, and it's doing speculative execution. And yeah, it has a really, really slow exfiltration speed though. It's like 15 bits per hour. So you not even a full byte of data that can be like taken away from this. Yeah, this is just really the actual white paper itself in the show notes or in the article in the show notes is pretty dense. And so I was reading through it. I haven't read through all of it, and we'll read through more of it again in the future. But as my brief skim saw, what it's basically trying to do is do what other Spectre attacks have done, but just over the internet by using packets to actually do this.
Nice.
Oh, and sorry, my mouth moves are very loud. Sorry. Wow. I will try to figure out where.
It's pretty crazy, like the NetSpectre thing. But like if you have a look at the exfiltration speeds, it's like 60 bits an hour. Oh wait.
60 is like the new hotness. 15 is the original one.
Right. Yeah. So 15 bits an hour on speculative execution. So I mean, targeting, like specifically targeting, like one thing that you want out of memory is like, I don't know. It doesn't seem very feasible. It's cool, but
it's really interesting to do it right, like in a lab setting. But all these attacks that aren't practical, I kind of lose a little bit of interest in them when they're not at all practical. Like 15 bits per minute, was it?
per hour.
That's fucking crazy. What is it
Like,
useful for?
like if I had like unlimited resources and like I needed something really badly, like, and I was, a whole nation state that I could just, throw shit at, like maybe, but I mean,
the only thing I could think it would be useful for is like extracting a CA.com, like from Ver or something.
Right, but you wouldn't do it as an indie. Like, I mean, who has this fucking time? I mean, you need to be
exactly.
Like, I don't have the time. Like, if there's like a 4096-bit key that I need out of memory, how many hours is that?
I wonder if it's faster if you run it locally, like if you hit your own interface.
I don't think so. I think it's a straight up. Yeah. Hey, so MG's had to run away real quick. There's you might want to you have a look in that for the picture of. Warning, it's ogreish.
What's that from?
Right now, apparently.
Well, I mean, the show's not that bad, dude. I think we're doing good.
I'm here. I'm just cleaning up.
That was a cutting joke. Sorry. Hopefully everything's good though.
Yeah, send a little Windex over to MG, cleaning him up.
Yeah. Oh man.
I don't know if Windex will fix that. Holy.
Yeah, that's great.
Enough Windex will fix anything.
Weird hardware. pitfalls.
Cool. So,
But yeah, the Net Spectre thing, it's cool. It's just, I don't know. It's not practical. I'll be the jerk. It's not practical. It's bullshit.
Sure.
Like,
yeah,
cool.
I agree.
It's just not gonna do anything for anybody.
There's been similar attack, like not similar, but like similar speed attacks where people were like exfiltrating through like flashing LEDs on
Yeah.
switches and shit like that. And
It's
like you like
it's adorable.
high speed cameras. Yeah,
It's
like using a high speed camera at a switch for like how long?
Yeah.
right.
Well, there's the one the other day we covered about using like the battery status to exfiltrate data like via a website from a phone.
So
Yeah.
yeah, right. And I think that was for keylogging, right? Something like that.
Yeah, it was for some stuff, but the speed is very
practicality
similar.
is just like it's such a it's either it was developed and used for a really specific use case, or it was developed in a lab where some people used ingenuity and kind of their artistic side to develop something really cool, but real world practice is just that's not going to be useful.
What was that? There was another one as well where they were using like they were heating up like a cap. No, they're heating up some component on, and then using like a thermal camera inside something for exfiltration. Like, if you can point, yeah. Like, but if you can like extract that data with a thermal camera, like point it at a device, lol. Like, how long is it gonna take? Why don't you just steal the whole device? You're right there.
Yeah, your thermal gun is going to be detected. People are going to start asking questions about why this thermal gun is hanging in the ceiling for the last 3 weeks.
So there's another story here that is a little more practical and more real. In that there is snoopware that has been installed on 11 million plus iOS, Android, Chrome, and Firefox for those different kinds of users. It's basically some company called Big Star Labs had bought out something or bought out a bunch of or somebody had acquired this company, and then that company they injected stuff into it. So it's just another example of like sort of just people hijacking older repos and older applications people use and just installing weird sort of spyware on it.
Yeah, and if you have a look at the names of some of the extensions, like AdBlock Prime, like it's similar to the popular AdBlock Plus, which I think we push uBlock Origin here.
Yeah.
I think that's what we tell people would use, and like some of the mobile apps, like Speed Booster, like Clean Droid, like I don't know who.
My favorite is Poper Blocker.
Wait, what's it called? Oh, Poper Blocker.
Poper Blocker.
Yeah, privacy policy. The privacy policy through a Chrome extension that is out of your light view. Nice.
Yeah, it's really funny that like I mean, it's a lot of it's just like why did you download it, but at the same time, I don't know. They rely on people to download just weird stuff, and the companies that run these and they just inject their own ads. They have their own ad networks that run their own code on your own machines, and who knows what happens. They get sold, they get bought, they get liquidated because they ran out of money because they spent it all. So yeah, it's just always something to look out for. Is the extensions and the apps that you use, and pay attention to mergers and things like that if you hear about them, because they might affect you.
I feel like some of these numbers might be skewed though, because it's giving you like how many installs from the App Store. So I mean, 1.4 million people, or like 5 million people with Speed Booster. That might have been like when they had like 2 phones ago.
Yeah.
Especially with like the older apps. But I mean, I guess if you have 5 million installs, you show up higher rated on the App Store regardless.
Absolutely.
Where are these companies for sale, by the way? Can I just buy one? A failing app company?
I'll give you $30 to take the lot.
I mean, that's got to be happening.
To them and say, hey, I'll give you this much. Just let me be you. yeah, whatever. Probably made by like a single dude. Like, well, that's more money than I was making off of this. So
So yeah, I don't know, just something to look out for. Not the biggest thing in the world, but it's something. So yeah, the other one here. Did you see the IBM fixes the flaw that lets hackers replace its serverless code with their own? This
was cool. Like,
yeah.
did you guys actually look at the Git diffs for this bug?
I did not.
So it wasn't very complicated. Like the fix wasn't a whole great deal, but there's basically like two routes in Apache Whisk, OpenWhisk, or whatever it's called. Like one of them was init, and one of them was the run. And so like when you init, that's when you push your serverless code, and when you run, that's when you that function executes. And you could re-init, so you could init and then you could init again. And so by using like a payload that wasn't all that complex, you could like modify the running code and away you go. And then when you run, it runs whatever the hell you want. So all they did was made it so that there was like it's now a reinitialization like false or whatever flag. So by default you can't do it. But it was pretty cool. Like definitely just replacing. So like if you wanted to mine Monero or some shit, you just push it to find someone that's a serverless farm and reinitialize everything.
Yeah. I mean, it's a sort of new technology that gets rolled out for like super high speed applications and things. It's interesting to see the sort of new security risks that need to be managed through this sort of thing.
Yeah, and looking at the code, like when you look at it, it all makes sense to the initial code before the fix, like initialize and then run. Like there's not a lot to it, but yeah, crafting that payload obviously like really switched the game up. And I'll be interested to see what other like where else in serverless land we see this thing. Like so, this was apparently the first publicly disclosed serverless bug, which I'm not sure if I believe.
Where else would you expect to find it? I'm not too familiar with serverless. The whole thing.
I guess like Amazon have an offering. Like there's
Oh,
a
okay,
bunch
so
of
it
different,
is.
like cloud type providers. They have sort of all different Amazon's Lambda, I guess. You run Lambda functions out of S3 buckets and shit,
Huh. So I wonder, yeah, I guess that would apply to other like large corporations, their own internal kind of server farms, maybe things like that.
Yeah, and I think the reason this one like got a couple of CVEs because it was the Apache Foundation and the code is on GitHub, right? Like the actual OpenWhisk server code. So to set up your serverless instance. So that's if you follow those CVEs in the article from the show notes, you'll see like the exact diffs. Yeah.
Interesting. So this definitely looks like an example of something that was uncovered, likely due to open source.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's static analysis is probably, I don't know, I would guess, yeah, the way it was discovered.
That's cool. It's interesting because there's a lot of places and a lot of people that would keep this and not really say anything about it. So when they do, these are good these are good things.
Yeah, it was discovered. Well, apparently, it was disclosed by a Israeli security company, and they're a serverless security company, which I didn't even know there was like that niche serverless security companies. But
yeah,
I guess we live in the future.
This is the future, guys. So yeah, the next story that we have here is really funny, and also not funny at all. This is LifeLock bug that has now exposed millions of customer email addresses. And this is interesting. It's really just silly the way this guy found it. It was through the unsubscribe button. He found the user like token or the customer record. The subscriber key is what it was called, and they was able to like randomly fuzz it or no. It was sequential. Sorry, it wasn't random fuzzing. It was incrementing the subscribers and grabbing that information from from it. That's just classic
saw
bug.
this and is iteration, like you said, but one of the things that at least, and I'm sure a bunch of other tools does, is it'll specifically avoid logout and some other pages that'll end your session. So if you're doing active scanning, specifically, like I said, out pages, and it won't do things to invalidate your session. So I'm guessing the this could have fallen into that kind of category of it's been missed because all these tools and all these things don't hit it by default.
Yeah.
Off base on it though.
Well, looking at it like it was just the subdomain like cloud.email.lifelock, like and the way that it's just providing a get key. I imagine this is it's the unsubscribe feature, right? So you get email, you don't know what it is, you don't know why you're on a list. Like, how often does it happen that you're like on this mailing list and you don't know why? So you hit the unsubscribe and you don't have to log in because you've got some token or whatever. And in this case, their token was probably like the auto increment primary key like ID field of the mailing list. So
Right.
I mean, this is a shitty design, really.
So you gotta just assume everything else inside their organization is shitty designed as well.
I mean, I don't know. I think like this could be one of those things where the marketing team were all about that, and they wanted this to work. Like they wanted this mailing list to get their marketing out, and then the security team probably might be working on their product, and there was like a there's I've seen in corporations a bunch of times like that. Where the marketing
Yeah.
team take control of like a WordPress blog.
Yeah, you're right. Marketing team does win out a lot. But does LifeLock actually produce any security products, or are they just doing essentially insurance?
It's like reputation management sort of thing, but not like typical thing. It's just basically all the different tools that you would use to like secure your account or your information if it's found somewhere. Yeah, I mean, I've never really played too much with LifeLock service,
Yeah, me
but they kind of
either.
just do identity theft protection. So it's like some sort of insurance.
I remember the CEO got his stuff jacked a few times though.
Oh yeah, because he put his social security number on
Yeah,
that
that's right.
billboard,
That's right.
and then he got his identity stolen like
Billboards.
14 times or something like that. Something absurd.
I mean,
Where,
Yeah.
I mean, what
a
if you
company
do
like that, though,
this?
they've got to have like somebody in there who's hacked a computer one time, right?
yeah,
Well, I mean, you would at least expect them to put like a lot of fraud protection around the CEOs. Uh, they didn't, because I know there was at least a few payday loans that they got in Texas. Like there were some really kind of funny places that people were able to like use his identity and get a couple grand. It wasn't anything like huge, but it was like six grand here and there. And it was because he was being a friggin' idiot, putting his social on every roaming billboards on those trucks. I definitely remember those days, and my God, I think it's been like a decade.
Yeah, I remember those commercials.
Yeah, it's it's a long time ago.
I remember them. They were forever ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I suddenly felt old halfway through the sentence.
Same.
Oh, man. So
but yeah,
LifeLock exposing it, I think, is peak irony, and we
Yeah.
have a lot of peak irony. There's one thing that we don't have on the show notes. I don't think that before we go to the next one. Oh wait, no, wait, it's at the bottom. Never mind. I'll shut up.
Oh, are you talking about? That I think you're talking about.
All right, we'll go out of order. The bit fee thing, it's unhackable and nobody can hack it. Don't even
Yeah.
fucking try.
we can discuss that if you want. Yeah, I just put that in the show notes as just the ongoing Bitfeast saga because it's been really entertaining the past couple days. To just, it's. Does anyone want to give a background about what actually happened and what it means?
Yeah, I can give it a quick thing. It's McAfee pimping what, in my is a total bullshit scam thing that apparently used to be some kind of juicer Android phone that's now been repurposed to serve shit coins or something like that. I don't really know. It's garbage.
MediaTek chipset phone, like $50 phone, basically with the SIM removed and the fucking camera removed. I mean, you can see if you look at the board, it had like those holes for the SIM card. There's holes for the fucking.
They removed
camera.
30 pieces from it though. Like they didn't even just remove the foam pieces that you would think, okay, maybe we should remove this. They removed steps that made the Trezor thing, which is hardware is based on, I believe. They removed pieces of that are secure from it, so it's less secure than that.
Can you just there's a picture of it opened up on the back if you want to put that on the stream. So like, but if you look at this thing, right, there's some key giveaways that tell you that it's a shit piece of hardware. One of the things here is that the SIM slots are those, like, there's two, right? Now, how often do you find a phone that has two SIM slots? Like, and then like if you have a look at it as well, there's a whole bunch of pads that are like also like test pads that are just like exposed, right?
Dude.
So it's kind of like you look at this thing and you compare it to like the Trezors, and like Bitfee have tweeted Trezors and Legendans and shit, like like internals, and it's kind of like it doesn't even fucking compare. But I want to call McAfee on when they were saying the iPhone couldn't encryption couldn't be broken, and McAfee went out, like the FBI or whatever was saying that, and McAfee went on TV and he was saying,
oh right,
all you need to do is like hack this iPhone to get the data out. Is you need a hardware engineer, you need a software engineer, you can do it, it can be done. The FBI full of shit, whatever. And then he comes out and says that this thing can't be hacked. Like, come on, bro, you know the difference.
So
Straight out the ass.
He doubled down on that way of thinking. If it has memory and if it has a CPU, it can be hacked. And he was talking about a competitor, and he was shitting on a competitor recently, like in the past day or two, and I retweeted it gleefully out of context because fuck him. But I mean, he was proving his own point yet again that it is hackable. It definitely is in some way. Worst case, if somebody gains control over the manufacturing process, it's game over. But it looks like it's even way worse than that.
Well, it also makes calls to like Baidu.com.
Yeah, I know.
I was going to mention, I don't think it was Baidu, but there was some like I think China-based app store, QQ, that it's phoning home to.
Yep.
So it's based off a Trezor? Is that what you...
No, it's based off just an Android phone. But
so a shout out to Cyber Gibbons. Definitely follow him on Twitter for this whole saga. He's like just ripping it apart, and the Bitfee people are losing their minds over talking to him. It's really kind of funny watching the back and forth.
Was that retweet you're talking about? What's the FCC ID of your products?
That was one of them, but no, McAfee actually said something like, if it has memory and he started out by saying it is hackable. But again, it was out of context. He wasn't talking about his thing, but in essence, he was. Just the whole thing is entertaining any way you look at it. I will say though,
the McAfee of the McAfee.
Yeah, he's a master of guerrilla marketing though, because that's all everybody's been talking about for the last 2 days.
Yeah. Also, they're like, "Oh yeah, we'll pay you $100,000," and their attack or specific attacks super narrow. And
did you see though? They opened it up to infrastructure for 250,000.
Yeah, we'll see how they write the way around it.
Yeah, I don't think people are gonna wait. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, you know, it'd be really interesting if like McAfee has like some massive stake in like Trezor or like Ledger or something like.
I think there's something more to it too, though. I really do. I think this seems too insane, even for McAfee. So we'll see.
Well, he's on their board.
Is he on Juicero's board? Because the store no shit was linked to some kind of juicer website.
Oh, I don't know.
some craziness going on there.
This whole thing is really amazing. Sorry, I had to step away for a second. But I really like that there's people literally calling out Cyber Gibbons and calling him a nerd and saying like, "Don't you have better things to do with your time and stuff?" Like, just like calling him what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and people are calling like a paid shill and this kind of stuff. And it's just
Yeah. They were literally like just like
like,
questioning.
you don't even have one out. Like,
Yeah, I love the one where someone said you're a nerd, and then as Thugcrowd, I tweeted out like, "Yeah, you're a nerd. Like, go play League of Legends and write /fic," and like people like retweeted it that like we're like arguing with him. It's just like really weird. It's like petty now, even though he's already done as much as he could to like tear it apart, explain exactly what it does. People are now just resorting to like, "Well, you're just a dweeb. Like, what do you know?"
I can think of worse like bad security solutions than an army of bots that just publicly shame someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I don't know what the end game is with it. I did see things, and it kind of even goes into some of the stuff that we should get into at some point, legal wise, and obviously anything I'm sure Fred you is, but you know, this isn't actual legal advice. This is just a conversation that happens to be with
And we definitely get into that more of that later on. I mean, we don't have that many show notes for today. Well, I did want MG, if he had a chance to talk about the ghost gun stuff.
oh yeah, right.
But
Yeah.
The last one that I had though, before we can get into that, is just the Chinese hackers who are sending malware via snail mail. It's really funny. Basically, there's these really small CDs that they're sending out. They're really tiny ones. They send this weird message out, and then it comes with like a CD, and it has just a bunch of malicious Word docs in it. It's just so weird that they would just send out the sketchiest thing, and this is just their.
Can't
just
most
wanna, like-
modern day laptops not run those micro CDs?
Yeah, most of them can if you just have you go off a pop-up
Nobody
drive.
has CDs.
If you've owned a MacBook in the last 5 years, you don't have a CD drive anyway. I'm not even sure where I'd put the fucking thing. Like, why aren't they sending out USB sticks?
Yeah, the small, tiny CDs, like literally, like
The ones that fit into the inner part of your CD.
Yeah, literally, like the smallest CDs ever.
The GameCube discs.
Literally.
It works on GameCube only.
Yeah.
GameCube malware.
I mean, yeah, like so. Elizabeth, like USB like storage is so cheap in China. They manufacture that shit too. Like they couldn't have had like that much price difference. Like we're talking a couple of points of cents per item to send out, when you would get like a way larger attack surface with USB.
Well, yeah, we're training people not to plug in weird USB sticks now. No one told them about CDs.
Weird, tiny, obsolete CDs that they can't even play.
Yeah.
If you have to go out and target a special drive for.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure like most modern day, like even CD drives modern day don't even work with those or something. I remember somebody on Twitter bought one and was like, "I'll just throw this in my CD player," and it just didn't work because they just don't read them correctly.
Yeah. It's definitely just a really bizarre way to do it, and they're trying to target apparently like state officials in government. It seems like the most haphazard way to do anything. But it's awesome.
I mean, it was fun. It's funny because if you go back in time, when what was it? When Hack 5 had the Switchblade that was USB CD-ROM, there was a USB stick.
Oh wow, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, like that was like the end of the. I guess that was like the end of the beginning, the beginning of the end of that era, right? Of like auto run CDs and shit.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't remember, that was a Windows XP would autoplay any file that said autorun.ini on an external drive, and the SanDisk USB came with a partition that could emulate a CD drive, and you could put an ISO in that CD drive with an autoplay.ini file that would then point to a partition of the USB, and automatically execute a file that you had there.
Yes.
That was one of the exploits in Stuxnet. Fun times.
I mean, if they're targeting somebody specific and they know that they somehow have this tiny CD-ROM drive, it's a great thing. But I don't know. Very, very specific, obscure attack vector if they're trying to leverage. But cool nonetheless.
Well, actually, now that README mentioned that, the one place that CD-ROMs are still heavily used is Quickshare, like power grid stuff, because it's read only.
Yep.
So CD-ROMs, burn a CD-ROM, you trust that that's good enough to cross the air gap. Why you would place some promotional stuff in your fucking grid equipment, I don't know, but we're reaching.
Wait. You know where this actually worked in a recent-ish type fictional places? In Mr. Robot Season 1, if you recall, Cisco was giving out his mixtape on the corner.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Gangsta!
But nobody probably listened to his stupid fucking mixtape
No,
because it was a CD.
The guy did in the story. No spoilers if you haven't seen it, but the boyfriend of he took the mixtape.
He should upgrade his laptop.
Yeah. Yeah, he also worked at the Did he work at the security company? I can't remember. He probably did.
Yeah.
But that's like
he worked at the All Safe place.
He was a SOC analyst. He clearly did it.
Hell yeah. Just to put it up again here, win this badge, solve our puzzle. Everybody who is doing this and PMing, asking questions about what to do, look at what type of file it is and figure out what it can do, what its capabilities are, what its purpose is, and what.
The file specifically just being thugcrowd.com/badge.gif.
Yep. So you go there, figure out what the file's doing, what it wants you to do, what information it gives you, and go from there. It's not that particularly challenging, but it's
no. We're not going to type the URL. No. Sorry, I'm
somebody already put it
on the chat. He's saying type the URL, please. No.
It's on the screen and it's in the chat and it's in your ears. Sudo type URL, please. So no, I know there's a bunch of people now doing this, so I'm glad. But yeah, I'm not going to give any more hints than just look at the file, figure out what it's doing, and what information it wants to give you.
And so, where is the or is that part of the challenge? Where to actually send the answer to?
It's in. So once you figure it out, once you get once you unlock everything, the file will tell you what to do.
Everything's clear.
Everything's very clear. Yeah. So you'll know when you figure it out, you will know, and it'll tell you what to do, and it'll alert us.
And a first come, first serve. So get on it.
Get on it. This badge is worth quite a bit of money. It's handmade prototype, and it's amazing. It's going to be a really awesome IoT and embedded development platform to play around with, and something that's just amazing. We heard from Bon and her husband about how they made it, and it's painstaking. It's like perfect and amazing. So I'm really excited to see it in person, and I'm really excited to give it away to whoever solves this puzzle. We do have another one, and if we'll try to get another puzzle going for next week, hopefully before DEF CON or some other sort of challenge, and be able to get somebody else to get another badge as well. So
yeah, and that might also include like special. So subscribe to Twitch and YouTube.
Yes, please, everybody who is here, subscribe to our YouTube. Because if we get 100 subscribers on YouTube, we can have a custom URL, which is really weird that we can't have it. Well, I mean, it's kind of good because it means that you're a legit channel and not just squatting on names. But yeah, we want to get some custom URLs going. So
we want to squat some awesome domains as well.
Yeah, our own. Yeah. So MG, do you want to touch on a bit what happened today? And
yeah, sure.
Yeah, how'd you cut the finger?
Just prying open some electronics. Did that go up on the screen? The stream?
No.
Okay,
No, I don't think so.
that would be hilarious. Okay, yeah. So the news the last week or so. 3D printed guns. After a 5-year battle, the DOJ backed down and decided to settle with Defense Distributed. The settlement basically said, we're going to pay you back like 40 grand worth of your legal fees. We're going to rewrite ITAR so that effectively civilian weaponry is covered under their jurisdiction, which basically means they can now put these files up on the internet like almost everybody else is currently doing, but they've been the only ones targeted by the government. They can put them up there, and they are no longer in violation of the federal export of firearms laws. Of course, that wasn't the end of the battle. Lots of politicians and everybody's freaking out. They're like, holy crap, we're going to have undetectable firearms on planes. And, the whole battle, the freak out that happened 5 years ago, it's all back again. So let's see what happened. There was somebody tried to basically get there's been multiple attempts here. The latest is I think it's 21 different state attorney generals are effectively trying to prevent this from occurring. They want to have a trial in September. Some are suing him directly. Some are saying that if you transmit these files into our state, then we will sue you. It's kind of a really interesting thing at the foundation of freedom of speech. Like, these are files. We've historically concluded that code is speech. It's very similar, kind of the crypto wars of the 90s. But now we actually have individual states kind of creating these weird legal blockades around data, much in the way you'd kind of expect, say, China to do it. Really weird. Of course, the fact that this delves into firearms means there's a lot of weird emotions that a lot of people kind of are okay with it when otherwise they wouldn't be. So really weird mix. As of a couple hours ago, I think it was a Washington judge created a federal injunction. Basically, even though they don't have authority nationwide, they can create a block nationwide. So effectively, the website hosting these files has been shut down now by this situation. So there's a lot of really interesting legal situations. I think our guest might actually have some input on this and be a little more intelligent than I am. But there's certainly some freedom of speech issues here. There's, this may roll up into the Supreme Court. Even the ability for a local judge to make a injunction that applies federally is a really weird thing. So I wonder if that also will roll up into a Supreme Court situation where they end up revoking those powers.
What's interesting as well is like the site being down. Like before the show, when we were talking about this, like from Australia, I'm looking at the Cloudflare mirror because the upstream is giving a 502, but I can still browse everything. I didn't want to download the files because our gun law is very different here, and DEF CON's next week, so I didn't want to like rock the TSA to be like, yo, stop right there, illegal scum. But I did click the link, and you cannot, from the Cloudflare mirror, the actual files are not mirrored.
Yep. There was three. I think it was New Jersey, Los Angeles, and there was another one where the locations were blocked at an IP level, and then they were also dealing with it with all mobile phones because apparently it's harder to geo block that way. And that was up until this federal, the nationwide takedown was issued. So not quite sure what the next steps are for them, but very interesting.
So what's the technically, how are they censoring this? Is this a DNS thing, or is it Cloudflare having to block it? How is this actually happening?
So well, the whole site's just down because it's nationwide. But back when, this rapidly unfolded across the week. So there were a couple of days in which they had to preemptively block these locations, and I believe it was IP based. Now, this was Defense Distributed doing it because they didn't want to deal with the fallout of getting a lawsuit. But they're preemptively also suing every one of these entities that are trying to censor their speech too. So it's really messy. There's a lot going on.
I'd like to say, like, the guy, the CEO, what's his name, Cody Wilson?
Yeah, Cody Wilson. Yeah,
Cody Wilson. He's very cocky about this whole thing, and he's swinging that dick. Like, he's letting them know.
Yep.
That
is his.
won't be a problem either. That'll never be a problem for him.
No, that's absolutely been his MO. I view him as someone kind of within the realm of crypto anarchists and even the cypherpunk movement. He takes a very different approach, though. A lot of us will use decentralized means to kind of undermine the authority and the laws, but he has taken the direct approach. He very visible. He puts a name directly behind it. There's no anonymity. And he's using the government almost against itself. He's kind of getting it to attack itself in a lot of interesting legal ways.
Also, I'd just like to point out, classic Eric S. Raymond endorsed the organization for their efforts. LOL.
Nice.
Whoa! Hey, RQU. RQU, just hold on 1 second. You did it, bub.
That was fast.
Wow. RQU,
already a winner.
RQU has won. That was amazing. Wow, you did it in 48 minutes or so. Sick. So RQU 45 on Twitter has won the challenge. So he will be getting. That was cool. I'm like, I just looked. I sat down. I looked at the thing and just saw that it was already solved. I was like, what? That was cool.
Should we do 2?
Sure. Yeah, we have 2 of them, don't we?
Okay, let's do 2.
Well, the thing is though that if we do 2, then the screenshot's already out.
Yeah, you have to come up with a new challenge.
Yeah, we can't do 2 actually because I had to come up with a new challenge, which is fine. We have them.
New challenge.
I mean, we could maybe for Sunday, maybe.
Yeah, we'll do that. We got many tricks up our sleeves. That was cool though. Thanks to RQ. Congrats.
Yeah.
We'll take that down.
No, don't take it down. Just pretend nobody did it, so everybody keeps trying.
I mean, people can. Yeah.
Sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah, dude. RQ's the shit. He knows his stuff.
Yeah, it has a lot of misdirection. So.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, no, we'll do something for Sunday. Sorry, that caught me by surprise a little bit, though. RQ.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. That's great.
Hell yeah. So, do you want to get into Esquiring? Do you want to get into your discussion now?
Sure. Yeah, I can get that started.
All right, awesome. So yeah, we have invited Esquiring on. He is a attorney. Is it an attorney or a lawyer?
There's like barely even semantic differences. I'll answer either one.
Cool. Well, a legal expert and knows a ton about the cybers and isn't adult and understands the law as well. So he's come on to basically tell us what he knows and thinks about some of the newer laws, current cases, and other things that are relevant. And yeah, so we can kind of just take it away, I guess. If you want to introduce yourself a little bit, that would be cool too.
Yeah, sure. Let me start with the extremely boring disclaimers. I am not your lawyer. None of this should be taken as legal advice, and these are my views, not those of the firm or any of my clients. So I'm an attorney at Tor Eklund Law, and I've been doing primarily cybercrime cases and other sort of high-tech, mostly litigation-focused stuff for the last 4.5 years here. The short version of the long story is I got into all this from, I don't know, being a techie person and doing crypto stuff since I was, knee high, and then was doing some human rights work in conflict zones where I was carrying client data and got real familiar with a whole lot of crypto stuff in action real fast. So that's sort of my short background. What should I talk about first?
I mean, so you had mentioned a little bit about some newer laws, and I wanted to see if you wanted to touch on that a tiny bit before you start going into more of the current cases and what they mean. You had any opinions on anything that has come out recently?
Yeah, I mean, there have been like one or two big changes in sort of the state of digital privacy. There have been some major sort of Supreme Court cases that change the way the law's looking right now, and then there have been a few bits of legislation. You've got the changes to Rule 41, EFF, and I think some others did some big advocacy about that. I think that was probably about a year ago now. It's a criminal procedure rule that's buried deep in the criminal procedure rule book, but it governs basically what can and can't be done by law enforcement when they're searching. And the change, I think, was targeted at sort of making basically like making things like Tor unmasking and de-anonymization easier. But the way it was worded and in practice meant that law enforcement has this kind of blanket potential to go into anyone's computer if they think that that's a route to their endpoint. So you've got that. That's one of the major changes that got some publicity. You've got the Cloud Act, which I think it's pretty safe to say was a direct response to the Microsoft case. I don't know how much that got press out there, but this was the one where Microsoft had the server that was in Ireland. U.S. law enforcement said, "Hey, turn over that data," and Microsoft US basically said, "Well, it's all overseas. You can't do that this way through the Stored Communications Act." And so the Cloud Act changes that. I don't know if there have been any sort of big test cases on that yet, but the long and short of it is, at least in the letter of it, this removes the territoriality requirement for basically cloud data. And then the other big one that's probably got the most press out of anything is SESTA FOSTA. And that doesn't change things too much for InfoSec folks. I think it's, I know like a lot of the sex worker community and a lot of people sort of, doing hosting services and things are way more concerned about it. But, it pokes a sort of poorly phrased hole in the Communications Decency Act safe harbor, which is, basically given websites of all shapes and sizes pretty strong protection from liabilities since 1996. And so there's been a lot of kind of fear mongering about that as to, what does this mean? How does this affect us? What is the actual scope of this limitation of immunity from liability?
Yeah. So, as far as these kind of things go, what do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about newer cyber laws? I can't think of any better word, but internet laws that are coming out. Because you see a lot of hype and a lot of like flapping about what things mean. And is there anything in particular that you see constantly that you would want to sort of address right off the bat?
Absolutely, yeah. I think the biggest issue is there's a lot of these, on one hand, there's a lot of these like on one hand informative articles, but they tend to leap to conclusions about exactly what this means.
Yeah.
And the reality is, this stuff moves slow. Even the people who wrote these laws don't necessarily, probably haven't thought through every single possible way that this could play out on the ground. SESTA FOSTA is a great example where, you've got lawmakers writing stuff based on this concern over child sex trafficking and what have you, and the language of what they write arguably means that, now your email service is on the hook if someone is sending nudes on it. And you've got a lot of articles out there saying like, oh, the sky is falling, this is what's going to happen, it's terrible, everyone's liable now. And the reality is that's just not how this sort of thing works. You might be liable, there's uncertainty now, but I think the thing I see most constantly and most consistently with the way these sort of new technology laws get rolled out and publicized is a lot of leaping to conclusions, and oftentimes kind of a scary worst case conclusion, when in reality, no one really knows how this is going to play out on either side of the aisle.
Yeah. No, I mean that's definitely something that we've seen a lot of, especially when we had the Georgia ADA on here on an earlier episode that we had done, when we kind of discussed sort of what it meant for security research for the laws that were being passed in Georgia, and it seemed like it was pretty misrepresented in certain ways, just about what things entail. And so I definitely think that it's really valuable for people to like look up the opinions and writings of actual legal scholars and people who deal with this on a day-to-day basis to actually understand what they mean, because there's a lot of things that are bad that we should pay attention to, and a lot of things that aren't as bad as we think that just sort of wasted everyone's time.
Absolutely, and I think the reaction to the Georgia law was a good example of everyone kind of freaking out in a way that I don't know, in my opinion, was ultimately productive. I read that law, and at least from the face of it, did look pretty bad.
Yeah, no, and then eventually that one didn't get passed, though, I don't think.
It got passed, but then it got vetoed, if I'm remembering right. And that was, I think just based on the timing of it, was pretty obviously, in reaction to the advocacy that the security community was doing and was reaching out to, state legislature and the state government.
Yeah.
So we had a news article from a few weeks ago that I'm interested in, where a man was pulled over by a street cop, like while he was driving, and he refused to have his car searched. They found a small amount of weed in his car or whatever, and he had 2 phones that he refused to unlock, and the judge sentenced him to 6 months for not unlocking his phones. Like, how? Do you have an opinion on how that could possibly where does that fit in?
I know the case you're talking about. I have so many opinions on it, and this is one of those cases where I think it's difficult but important to sort of draw a line between here's me speaking as a someone with knowledge in this particular area of the law, and here's me speaking as an activist or an advocate. As a legal analyst, I think the thing that gets most often missed with that particular case is it's not like he, right off the bat was saying, "Oh, I don't remember." If I'm remembering this correctly, it was kind of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, oops, I forgot thing, where he'd been using the phone like just a few minutes ago, and then was starting to say, "Oh, well, no, I don't remember the passcode anymore." And there's, just reading through case filings, I can see how like the judge could think that was maybe a bad faith statement. And I think like, and he's the jail time is coming from that contempt issue. So on one hand, like as a legal analysis, it's not it's not the best test case for digital privacy because this is questionable. On the other hand, it's speaking as an advocate, I think it's ridiculous that he should be forced to provide that passcode in the first place. There is a Fifth Amendment right not to be witness against yourself. I don't see how anyone should be compelled to give up their passcode to anything.
So with searching a device though, so similar to searching a car, like like I understand you can say no, you can decline the search. That's when the dog comes and sniffs it, and they need reasonable, probable cause or whatever to search, right?
Yep.
Is that the same with a digital device? Like was it kind of like he had his phone and the officer had reason to believe that there might be something on the phone, or he witnessed something that might be able, or that he just straight out unlock your phone, bro?
So post Smith v. Jones and Riley v. California, I think this is like it's not a totally settled area of law yet. So I can't say like a solid, totally 100% yes, but it's pretty likely that in that kind of situation, yes, the probable cause requirement would be the same for a phone as it would be for the car itself, if not maybe even more protective in that kind of situation. Whether, hey, we found weed in the car and we saw you using your phone recently is enough. Good question. Probably is under current probable cause law. It's a pretty low standard as things go, and a lot of it is comes down to could this law enforcement officer have sort of a reasonable suspicion that there was something on there that they needed to look at. So they might have had probable cause. They would probably need a, doing it the right way. They'd probably need a warrant to search that phone. I think, again, I'm a little fuzzy on the exact details with that particular case. I think there might have also been an issue where like the person sort of made some statements that made it sound like they were okay with them searching the phone. And once you get into consent to search, a lot of those sort of ordinary protections get muddled or sometimes even thrown out the window. And that's a whole other sort of can of worms.
I guess that's why Dan often has his statement at the end of the show.
Yeah, shut the fuck up and get a lawyer.
That is the correct advice.
You know, what you touched on was the fact that he might have been using the phone, and to me that's especially terrifying to be a bar that's set. And I know it's case by case, but especially now when you consider the use of Touch ID or biometrics, fingerprints to unlock stuff, there's protections around it where manufacturers have made it kind of difficult for law enforcement to use it against you. But and in the same time, you're really not typing your passcode all that often anymore. Um, your accounts, I don't know how many of you have it set up, but your fingerprint, almost never typing your password. And so it is really easy to forget your passwords, even if you have used it in the past day or month or week. And so just it being a feeling that a judge or somebody has for contempt is kind of a scary thought.
Yeah, no, it's definitely scary. And if I think about the times I've appeared before judges and had some sort of technical concept to explain, I would not want to be the person standing there in some state criminal court down in Florida trying to explain a password manager and complex like multi special character 3-digit bit length passwords to a low level state criminal court judge.
Yeah, I think just for the Australians listening, I think if you have to be held for not handing over a crypto password, like a crypto key for something, I believe there needs to be supporting evidence that the device already contains some other. There needs to be evidence that the device contains evidence for whatever the like the issue happens to be. So like they can't just assume, they need to have proof. But I'm not sure on that. Consult an Australian lawyer. But yeah, we're a little different here.
Yeah, I mean, in writing, you've got somewhat similar things here in most cases, but in practice, a lot of the time, a judge will consider that bar satisfied by the police officer saying, "Yep, we think there's stuff on there that we need," and they sometimes don't inquire much harder than that.
I think that's a certain point that a lot of people don't get. At least they don't get until their first brush with law enforcement. Is that, yeah, you read, and you may have read about, oh, well, I have the right to do this and this, but you really don't if a judge in a local township decides that you don't.
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate reality of a lot of Fourth Amendment law is that it's considered sort of retroactive by the court. So your remedy is to, deal with it after the fact and try to get a court to say that they can't use that after they've already got it.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing, really quick, I wanted to get out there before I forget, and it's kind of one of the topics that actually led us to wanting to have you on, and again, thanks for joining us. And that gets down to the statute of limitations is I think what started all this. And I know I've learned a lot over the past few weeks as we led up to this show. But it seems like for CFAA cases specifically, if it's just around the bookends of CFAA, it's around 5 years, and it's 5 years from the discovery of the crime, though. It's not 5 years from when the crime actually happened. And I was wondering if that's generally known to be the actual. Am I getting it right, or is there more to that you can maybe shed some light on?
You've got that right. The obviously the tricky question with that is, when was this discovered? And I actually don't know of a CFAA case off the top of my head where that's been litigated, or where the courts have like actually had to grapple with sort of that knowledge question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the reason it becomes a pertinent asterisk that's really important is we have our war story times, right? And we have our beer talk where we feel comfortable talking about things. Oh, it's been so long ago. But if it's up that hasn't previously been known and is now on the radar, that's now on the radar, and the clocks start from then. So I think that's it's an interesting piece that unfortunately might be pretty important.
I think one of the key things to remember is it's a saying that I hope everybody here knows already, but no logs, no crime.
But yeah, probably that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, but no logs, no crime. I'm not saying you should do crimes. I'm not saying you should not leave logs. You should have a perfect Steam service that collects everything.
There's been people convicted of murder without evidence, though, haven't there?
So did we touch on the I didn't know when this is actually posted, this Twitch question, but if hypothetically speaking, if a person using an encrypted chat program had a self-destruct feature for all data files and keys associated with it, would that be destruction of evidence if said destruction occurred upon the officers approaching the individual?
So I was talking about this exact topic with a friend of mine who does a sort of a lot of like corporate side data preservation law kind of stuff, and there's a few sort of facets to the question. In that particular hypothetical, I think the first thing is, if it's happening like as law enforcement's at the door, yeah, it's a pretty easy analogy to, any number of cases you've got where folks are destroying physical evidence, knowing that law enforcement's on the way, or where they've been tipped off by somebody or some insider, or they're like hearing the knocks on the door. In those situations, yeah, there's a pretty good chance that could support a destruction of evidence charge. Even the edge cases where you've got things like, let's say you've got it set to wipe everything every 30 days. Even those situations, yeah, legally, if it's a standard policy that's done across the board no matter what, maybe not, but there's a world of difference between what they can actually get a conviction on and what they can charge. And I see that all the time with criminal cases in cybercrime areas, especially, is you'll see this sort of strategy where DOJ will charge everything they possibly can, and the hope is, oh, we'll make it so scary that they'll negotiate a quick plea and everyone goes away with what they want out of this ish. So could you be convicted of it in that sort of situation where you've got this sort of standard deletion policy? Maybe. Would you be charged with it if you're a target for something else anyway in this hypothetical? I would be surprised if that charge didn't get thrown in there with everything else.
Yeah, and it's interesting because there's, you see that in like the, movies and things of just like, magneting all the drives, blowing everything up, or just, the basic everyday function of just like signal with disappearing messages and things.
Right.
I feel like the ability for us to do that kind of, ephemeral sort of communication, which in most cases we will say is definitely not like Snapchat and other disappearing messages programs, but in things like say Signal, or other sort of trusted applications, what is the sort of gray area that you're seeing with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think ephemeral messaging, as I've seen it play out in court cases where it's come up, it's kind of a double-edged sword. I mean, the cases where it really helps, you're not going to see it in court because if that evidence isn't there, if it's been deleted, a lot of the time that goes into the charging decision in the first place, where maybe it doesn't get beyond a search or an informal chat with the prosecution. If they really don't have the evidence and don't think they can, imply something criminal from the lack of it, you're not going to even see that in court. On the other hand, with the cases that do get brought where stuff's been destroyed using ephemeral messaging, whether it's the judge or the jury, these are smart folks. They know what they know what it smells like when something is mysteriously deleted shortly before law enforcement shows up. So it sort of cuts both ways.
I mean, would you say then, if that's the case, that if you always use disappearing messages in Signal to like talk to your mum, right? You want to call your grandma, you want to tell your grandma happy birthday, I love you, and you use Signal for that, then wouldn't that show that that's just a practice you follow rather than you have one contact who happens to be a meth dealer and you only use disappearing messages for that guy?
As a best practice, I'd recommend using PGP to email your grandma happy birthday. But in general, yeah, using it across the board is going to look less shady than using it with your meth dealer friends.
Nana is fucking hip though. If she's using PGP, I'm gonna put that out there.
Watch everybody start messaging their grandma as a cover to increase the ratio.
What is PGP? No.
No. You know that your grandma's using PGP and not Signal because she figured it out when it was new. She hasn't caught up with this Signal magic yet.
Speaking of catching up with Signal magic or any other sort of new technologies, I wanted to ask you, Esquiring, what sort of technical challenges you see with people who have to enforce the laws without understanding them? Because we have like really older judges and older people in law enforcement who are facing new kinds of crimes that they don't understand. Like, how does that play out in the real world, and how does it affect people who are caught up in these kind of things?
Yeah, I've spoken with some folks in law enforcement who are sort of at this intersection where I'm talking like probably the best example I've got is I had a chat a few months ago with someone who's senior in a state law enforcement organization where their field offices are little village cop shops, and they don't have the technical know-how or the resources to be doing like high-tech forensic investigation. And a lot of them more and more are finding outside sources, whether that's private industry contractors or bringing people in from like a centralized state capital office or other sort of like specialized investigation units. So in some ways, it's you've got some examples of folks routing around that lack of technical knowledge by bringing in experts. Judges, it's really hard to generalize. You've got some judges. I don't know how many of y'all followed the Oracle and Google case. You've got some judges who've like really taken it on themselves to learn the technology that comes up in cases they've got. You've got other judges who this is all black magic, and they don't want to hear a word about it beyond what they absolutely need to for the case. And so it's really hard to say. Like there are certainly organizations out there. I know there's I think Berkeley's got a clinic that does some trainings for judges sort of during the quiet seasons. And I think there's other organizations out there doing sort of ongoing education programs for judges to sort of do some technical training, but it's almost impossible to generalize. Like anything, the ones that want to learn it are going to learn it. The ones who really don't aren't.
So just on that top. Sorry, Dan, you go.
Go ahead. You had line.
Yeah, so someone I know is doing a master's degree currently in criminology, and they recently had an area on cybercrime, and the lecturer was still talking about the differences between hackers and crackers and all this kind of stuff that we don't talk about anymore that has been clarified much further. If you were a criminology student, I mean, is there any advice you could give out that would be the best way to get up to speed on what is now and how to like stay current with what's going on without like becoming an infosec professional, I guess?
Yeah, I mean that's the funny line. Like the academy in anything moving as quickly as information security, the academy is always going to lag behind the practice. I think like anything else, go out there, get involved with, you know, uh, first off, if you have opportunities to where you're in school for this, get involved in the field, whether that's an internship with, you know, a on whatever side of this whole criminal justice sector you can, whether it's a forensic shop or a defense firm. Like, find internships, find folks to shadow, get that on the ground experience if you can. And then other than that, I think if you're following the news, if you're keeping an eye out for the white papers and scholarly articles that come out, I think those are sort of the best places to keep looking.
It's cool. It sounds like it's a good potential place for people to migrate after after kind of getting the technical piece of their younger years out of the way. And once you start falling farther behind, I'm literally just talking about myself, moment, by the way. As I kind of look forward to my career, I see myself keeping up with stuff quite to the detail that I need to, myself being competent enough to defend people um, in legal situations. Do you think that that's some track that might become a trend?
I think it definitely can be. That there's already some folks out there doing sort of forensics, expert witnessing, and stuff like that. I think it's not like cybercrime is not going away anytime soon. So
Yeah.
I think there's certainly going to be a growing demand for people who have sort of the combination of technical skills and testimonial skills to do that well and reliably.
Good deal. Actually, I had a tweet that I had posted in the Discord chat. This is a topic from what we've been talking about, but it was from the bit, I think, and it's specifically here. Let me post it again. I'll post it in general in voiceless voice. Sorry, I gotta press shift to talk. Anyways, so it's a status update from McAfee's adventure where it specifically says infrastructure is now fair game for $2,000. Is that in your personal opinion, not necessarily legal advice opinion? Is that something that has just opened them up to a whole can of worms that they maybe don't realize they opened it up to?
So when they first posted, not this infrastructure tweet, but when they first posted about the, it was originally I think $100,000 bounty. I was giving them some shit about it and tweeted about that a bit, because even if you click through to like the quote unquote details on their website about the quote unquote scope of this bounty, it was really poorly defined, and this doesn't help them in that sense.
It certainly doesn't, because it doesn't even say view the site for details. It just literally says now you can attack that infrastructure.
Yeah, if I were their legal department, I'd be making some phone calls right now because, I mean,
everybody should
even
use
if they're not,
with that.
Yeah, like that is just not a good way to phrase what I think they wanted to say.
Poor them.
Yeah,
I guess.
I don't know if they've yet updated their details page on what attacking the infrastructure means or limited that scope in any way. I won't name the company, but I did some work for someone a few months back. I guess it would have been, actually, maybe it was about a year now, with, I guess without going into all the vaguely confidential details, someone who had submitted to a bug bounty that a company had like just put up and had done a really bad job of writing their scope. And like the the timeline was really similar to what I'm seeing Bitfi doing here, where it seemed like they just really wanted to get their bug bounty out the door, didn't bother talking to legal or waiting for them to come back with like an actual scope, and so just said, yeah, everything's fair game, go for it. And this person found something that was high priority and ranked for like top bounty rewards, and rather than just pay out and be decent about it, the company came back and sort of tried to backpedal their statement with some like scary, threatening legal language. And thankfully that one didn't get that messy, but there's just a lot of potential there for it to become a really ugly, complicated, expensive legal dispute for both parties, where some company has put up a poorly worded bug bounty, and when someone tries to collect,
Interesting.
yeah,
I think that's good advice though, because it's saying you can roll the dice that this might be seen in court as a they're giving up their rights, but you're gonna have to go through that ride to find out.
Yeah, and I think like practically speaking, I think that's what keeps this being kind of like a funny legal hypothetical as opposed to an actual clusterfuck. Is that the cost of entry to actually fight that out in court is pretty high. I'm certainly not going to go like DDoS Bitfi's infrastructure and say, well, you owe me 250K now, because the cost of actually they said it's fair game, no big deal. The cost of holding them to that is probably end of the day probably as high as the reward.
Right. Is there any specific kinds of cases that you've seen that do have a general trend towards them? I know you said earlier it's hard to generalize a lot of these cases that you probably come across. I'm assuming there's probably at least a certain subsection that are almost always people end up getting found guilty or having to settle in some way, versus cases that generally go towards the defendants. Is there anything to that you can say?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, there's definitely patterns there. I think one of the hardest things to I guess appreciate from the outside is, in the eyes of both judges and juries, hacker hysteria is very real. Even the more open-minded, technically minded folks that get called for juries or that serve on the bench, most of the headlines out there, most of the talk out there about hackers and hacking is fear-inducing, and people react to that. And I think with a criminal case, there's a strong trend towards prosecution, in part because people are sort of pre-primed with this concern and this sort of almost paranoid hysteria about hackers, especially in the wake of the 2016 elections and all the sort of press that's come out since then.
Oh, interesting. So you've actually seen an increase in fear, for lack of a better term, since then?
Yeah, and it's one of those tricky things where like I can't cite you to like a case that says having that sort of fear is okay. There isn't one. It's just in practice, that's what it looks like on the ground. This is the thing people are scared about and don't understand. And just like the witch hunts in the 1600s, you've got the same sort of fear of the unknown coming into play here.
Would you say that when like a lot of the defendants who come through are just because hacker is an interesting term. Like people think hacker bad hacker, but we know that it's the mindset, it's what you're doing, it's the technical aspects and all these other kind of things. But would you say that the kind of quote hackers that become defendants are generally just criminals that also happen to have some technical skill?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think probably some of the most interesting cases have been ones where someone was acting not so much out of criminal intent, but out of curiosity. And that goes back to the early days of the CFAA. I mean, the Morris worm was one of the first prosecutions and convictions under that law back in 91, I think.
Right, yeah, real early.
Yeah, so you've got that. You've got more recent examples like I think Marcus Hutchins is one of the better examples in recent memory of someone being pretty aggressively prosecuted for so stuff that I would not define as malicious criminal hacking based on everything I've read.
Yeah. So, not to spend a huge amount of time for a variety of reasons, but what's your like quick gut feel on that? Is grandstanding by the FBI? Is this them thinking they have more than they have, or is it something that is unknown completely?
Yeah. Let me just first off with the caveat of I'm always hesitant to backseat lawyer on an ongoing case because I've been on those cases and there's like a million things you see on the inside that no one on the outside gets to see until years later, if ever, just because of how discovery works. But my kind of like knee-jerk reaction, what this looks like to me from the outside, based on the way that they.
I was just gonna say we can steer away from it then. I mean, even.
Oh no! I mean, I can give you the sort of 1,000-foot answer.
Right.
I think my knee-jerk on it, just based on the way that the government's gone after him, also on the way they arrested him. I think that they thought this was going to be, we throw a bunch of charges at this guy, he pleads out to something, then we can use him as a cooperating witness on something, or I think they had some motive for coercing him into a quick, easy plea deal, and now it looks to me like a face saving exercise for DOJ, where that didn't work. He fought back, and now they've got to push back harder to, I don't know, not look weak or whatever goes on in their heads.
Yeah, so we mentioned last week. Sorry, Dan, I think it was you that mentioned last week about this being potentially setting precedents on like the same sort of holding code, like with Packet Storm, or like with what are they called now, Millworm Injector, whatever. How they have these code repositories of exploits, where this could potentially be set precedents that holding code becomes the crime, even if you didn't write it. Like, do you think that's a potential? Like, is that something we should be concerned about?
I honestly, I think the entire security research community should be concerned and actively lobbying about Marcus's case. The fact that they're bringing charges under 18 USC 2511, 2512, based on quote unquote devices used to surreptitiously eavesdrop, basically, in relation to code, that's something that threatens anyone making, that renders Nmap illegal. Theoretically, like that affects the whole community.
It's really bad times.
Yeah, ridiculous.
So you had brought up some other cases, Esquiring, that were interesting when we had chat before you came on. So you had mentioned specifically like Lori Love was one of them, and Carpenter versus United States. I'm not sure if you had anything. You brought them up, but I wasn't sure if you had anything in particular that you wanted to discuss about them. But I'm interested in your take on both of these things.
Yeah. So Carpenter's interesting. It was the sort of first big case on cell site location information, and certainly the first one to reach the Supreme Court. I was following this one pretty closely. I think a lot of the kind of law and technology folks that I know were, and was fully prepared for bad news because most of the precedent to date on digital devices in general has been pretty depressing. And the Supreme Court came out and sort of granted their decision for Carpenter in this case. I think this is another good example of that leaping to conclusions about what it means that we were talking about before, where a lot of the headlines the day after say, oh, well, now they need a warrant for any cell site location data. And it's not quite that broad reaching. This case drew some pretty specific lines about like the timelines involved and the volume of location information. And, it remains sort of an open question. Won't know until the next cases come through about whether this applies as well to shorter periods of time or smaller collections of historical location data, or if it applies to real-time location data in the same way. So there's still a lot of open questions there, but it was just a nice bit of good news in a sea of bad when it comes to digital privacy. Larry's case is another one that. So I'm one of his lawyers. So there are, I'm fully biased in this, but it was another one where I think we were all sort of prepared for bad news about extradition, and it was nice to see the UK court recognize just how outrageously harsh the US law is for computer misuse compared to Britain's. One thing that we focused on a lot in the public briefing was, for if you look at, for example, good examples are if you look at like the MolSec folks who were charged in the UK, you're talking for stuff similar to what Larry was accused of. You're talking, maybe 2 years tops, often less. Whereas here, Larry was looking at, it was upwards of 90 years, and that was, or 90 or 99 years, and that was not even getting to the multiple jurisdictions he was being charged in. So, I think it's if you're looking for bits of sort of pushback on U.S. computer crime laws and places where there's sort of leverage to change, other countries saying, no, we're not going to send you people to prosecute because your laws are too harsh is a pretty good lever.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see, like, with people just trying to get extradited and like just having to play by the rules of the whole world. We have like GDPR, which is affecting everybody, and like other sort of like laws that if you do something somewhere, even if your data is just passing through, it could potentially be under the jurisdiction. So it's interesting to see how that sort of plays out on a case by case basis.
Absolutely, I think especially with you've had international crime since the 1600s and the days of like piracy, but the internet, I don't want to get too like techno-utopian about it, but you definitely have some really new and interesting questions being asked about how much is international, where do those sort of lines of sovereignty begin and end with things like law enforcement or data privacy. And the GDPR is another good example of a sort of new law that presses on that boundary and that area a bit.
Yeah, I think the old Pimp Alex 91, he was spread out quite significantly across the globe, and they picked him up in Thailand, where RIP. But had that have gone, had he had to go to court somewhere or multiple places to face different charges, I mean, that would have been a real clusterfuck of what happened where, who belongs to what, and
Yeah, exactly. And then that was, thankfully, it sounds like we're not going to have to deal with it in Larry's case in the U.S., but that was another issue there, was he was being charged in 3 different jurisdictions, and just the question of, who's actually got jurisdiction on what happened when in this whole mess it's a tough question when you're talking about the internet, where servers and data are all over the world.
So how do you think of this, though, these existing laws will change, affect like future legislation? Like what sort of things do you think are sort of like trending towards as far as sort of way that people are now approaching these really, really new subjects like that?
Yeah, there's, I think, sort of at my most optimistic, I think as we all become, both the sort of technical and non-technical folks out there become more and more reliant on technology and more and more aware of the ways that data is used or collected or transferred around. I think I'm hopeful that we'll see more things like the GDPR, where you're sort of taking tangible steps towards more protection of people's personal data and controls on how that's used or misused by third parties. On my less optimistic side, I think, like I was saying before, hacker hysteria is at an all-time high.
Yeah.
And the flip side of increasing awareness and reliance on technology is that hysteria is also not going away. So I look at most of the recent amendments proposed to the CFAA are things that threaten to make its reach even more broad and more harsh, or sort of more damaging and threatening to the security researcher out there.
I guess Jack's got a few questions about if you have any views on WikiLeaks posting ICE patrol info on their agents. I mean, the WikiLeaks is an ongoing thing. It's a very big legal mess, but does that come in, like, I'm not even sure where that would stand.
I actually, what did they post about ICE patrol info? I actually hadn't heard about this.
Information on their agents. I think there's a link further up in Voiceless Voice. So on the actual agents themselves. Oh, if you haven't heard about it, then I guess it's kind of a bit of a hard time to get knowledge on it real quick. So
okay.
We'll move on.
I see the article here. Let me take a quick scan.
Yeah,
this is talking more about like DNC stuff.
Yeah, the one that says activist publishes 11,000. Oh wait, never mind. That's something completely different. Yeah. No, I mean, there's like it. I feel like I don't know. I guess like leaking in general. It's just like a huge aspect of like everything that is the news now. I mean, most information we're getting is just literally like leaks from somebody like immediately after something happens, and it's interesting to see how that also plays out too. Because I mean, there's certain, I don't know. Do you see like how is that sort of used? I guess in from a legal standpoint, when somebody leaks something about somebody, like can you use? I don't know. It's like I feel like a lot of people just like they'll hear about something that somebody does from a leak or whatever, and then they expect people to just be able to act on it without being able to verify or anything. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about like the ability to use leaked information in like another case or in court or officially, it's sometimes yes, sometimes no. There's not like a nice clean answer to it necessarily. You've certainly got things like the Defending Trade Secrets Act, where if stuff is leaked and you don't necessarily have reason to know that it was, it's the way that leaking like affects confidentiality rules or trade secrets rules, where if it's out there in public, then it's de facto not a trade secret anymore. But that doesn't necessarily protect the people doing the leaking. That's a whole different area of the law.
Yeah. So there's also this sort of thing about whistleblowers as well, which people have been debating, which is I don't know how you classify it or what constitutes the difference between whistleblowing and leaking. If there is a legal distinction, but that's something that I also wanted your opinion on too, because we have people that I don't know. We see so many different things that need to be addressed, whether it be something like civil or something just technical and ethically wrong. I don't know. How do you see that sort of landscape of whistleblowing and the ability for people to do that now?
Yeah, I think whistleblowing is one of those terms that gets thrown around with not a lot of like semantic consistency, because there are whistleblower laws that give specific protections in specific situations, but like those vary a lot by industry. Typically, this is something like inside the company or with a specific government agency that handles certain types of whistleblowing. And so, in a like technical legal sense, whistleblowing is very different from the way it gets used popularly. I don't think there's like an easy, clean legal answer to the ethical question of whistleblowing or leaking. So I can't I can't really read the entrails on what's going to be legally all right or not. Most of the time, if we're talking about public disclosure of the sort that whistleblowing gets talked about by and large, there's plenty of laws that make that a very dangerous thing to do. But laws and ethics are very different things. It may be thoroughly illegal in a way that I, as a lawyer, cannot say, yeah, you should do that. You should not, because it's illegal, and I have to say that. But on an ethical level, yeah, I think that's a very different question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like so much that we see now is a lot of the high-profile cases in general that are in the news media's sort of sphere. I feel like there's a lot of it is a lot of speculation and sort of like hearsay about what things are law, like what are laws, what isn't laws. And a lot of it gets mixed up with that what you were saying before, like ethics versus laws, which are two different things. So yeah, I completely agree.
It's messy because on one hand we sort of normatively want our laws to follow ethics and sort of morality on a sort of high concept level, but the reality is at best they get close on a real good day, and other than that they draw pretty bright lines between the two.
Yeah. So actually, there's another thing that you had brought up that I wanted you to sort of cover or talk about a little bit, which I wanted to understand more, which is the Sandvig versus Sessions. And what was this all about here?
So this is, of the various CFA cases out there, this is one of the ones I'm most excited about to see kind of where it goes and how it gets resolved. This was a lawsuit brought by the ACLU on behalf of a number of researchers, Sandvig among them, who I think most of them, if not all of them, were doing really interesting discrimination research in online real estate websites, where it's kind of this classic method of discrimination research where, in the physical analogy, like old-timey real-world examples, you'd submit two applications with certain details changed to suggest a particular national or ethnic or cultural background. And done at large, you can see the patterns of, okay, well, based on the way this large organization is responding, we think there's probably bias of some sort. So these are researchers who were looking into that in online real estate sites where they would use, they'd make fake profiles basically and submit fake user data to these sites. And their concern is, well, that is by the terms of service of these sites not allowed. So we want to know if that's risking a CFAA prosecution or violating the CFA in general to do so, because you've got at least 3 circuit courts in the country who, 3 sort of big chunks of the country that say, yep, terms of service are enforceable in criminal CFAA actions. And it's still an open question in a lot of places as well. So they brought a lawsuit against Jefferson Sessions as in his role as head of DOJ, and as basically trying to find out, A, does this break the law, and B, if it does, we think there are constitutional issues with that because this is research that is constitutionally protected. So they recently won a motion. They prevailed over the defendant's motion to dismiss on a number of things. So it's still really early stage. This is by no means a finished case, but we've got at least a very strong signal from the court saying that they're actually going to consider. I think they did dismiss the. And again, I'm going off memory here, so apologies if I get the details wrong. But if I'm remembering right, they did dismiss the unconstitutional as written challenge. They did not dismiss the unconstitutional as applied challenge. So the difference being as written means no matter what against anyone, this is unconstitutional, just the way the text works.
Yeah.
As applied means for this specific situation, the way in this case could be used or would be used wouldn't be constitutional. So we will at some point get to see that either settled out or litigated in court down in, I think they're down in DC. Where are they again?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting to see the sort of paradoxes, I guess, that come up with doing research about things, and the fact that now we do have very, very comprehensive terms of service for usage, which is also the reason why a lot of people are scared as far as security research goes to do certain things, or even do disclosure, which is a running theme here. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to see how that can be used against you very specifically in court.
Yeah, I think for security researchers, this is a really interesting case because a lot of the same arguments apply to, hey, I'm violating these terms of service, but it's for, research purposes, or a bug bounty that isn't specific on accepting terms of service violations or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, it has the potential to really affect the safety of people, technically but harmlessly violating terms of services. And up to now, DOJ's response to the question of, hey, does this, we're concerned about this violating the CFA, their response so far has been, well, our prosecutors would never bother dealing with that or bringing a case about that. But
yeah,
I don't see how that's a satisfying answer. That leaves you, to the whims of whatever mood the prosecutor's in that day.
Yeah, so it's still up to if they choose, they're obviously taking your intent at face value before they choose to proceed, right? It's up to the discretion. There's a person's discretion before anything proceeds. Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Right. So you could just get an asshole who's on a bad day, and he's like, "I'm gonna go after you as hard as I can."
Right. If Johnny Law stubbed his toes this morning, and you were the hapless researcher to land on his desk, that's, I don't think that meets the predictability standards that we sort of hope for from the law, where I can go out and say, well, I know this is legal and I know that's illegal, so I'm going to do this thing. If we want law to be something that guides people's behavior in sort of an overall social good kind of sense, it can't just come down to what mood the prosecutor's in that day.
So with that, if we talk about patching code and stuff, right, with multiple contributors, we often do peer review, scientific journals peer review, academia stuff. Can you go I feel like Johnny Lawmaker is in a bad mood today. Can I have a second opinion? Or is it kind of that? No, now you have to go through the whole process.
There's, I have not been. I've not been a federal prosecutor, so I can't speak to the exact details. But there's definitely office bureaucracy. There's, there's sign-offs from higher ups and things like that. It's not literally one person's decision, though. In practice, it's a little messier than that.
MG, what is the question that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, so we were earlier talking about the statute of limitations, how that actually applies. I think there's a really good example of a very common misconception that exists in the hacker community. I was hoping you could maybe elaborate, give a few more examples of common misconceptions that can be very dangerous.
Yeah, sure. If you ask a cyber cop if they're a cop, they don't have to tell you. I'd be seriously though. I think probably the other most common misconception in cybercrime law that I've seen several times now is I think there's a lot of there's a lot of misconceptions around what loss and damage means under the CFAA, both by technical folks and by lawyers. It's sort of a weird law in a lot of ways. One of those is that it has very special definitions for both of those terms. And one thing that I see often from the technical crowd is the notion that, well, it's not damage if there were backups, or it's not damage if, nothing was permanently deleted. And I would recommend anyone suffering from that misconception reread the definition of damage under the CFAA. I think it's 10.
So on damages, would you say that can it be like, oh, you accidentally caused the application to crash and it was down for 2 hours, and that's like 2 hours of some expensive consultant's pay, and that's more than $10,000. Like, is that damages or is that just their costs?
So first off, I've got some worse news for you. The felony threshold is only $5,000, and that hasn't really been updated since the mid 1980s. So what was once sort of a high threshold before you had, multi-million-dollar information security companies is now a drop in the bucket. So you've got a very low threshold to potential felony charges. The other piece here is, that hypothetically you're talking about, I have literally had that case. Someone who was charged with running some like automated security audit tools, and just by sheer bad luck happened to hit up against some really old hardware being run by a third-party contractor, and their security audit tool ended up crashing this email system.
Wow.
And when I say crashing, I don't mean like fell apart, wouldn't get back up again. I mean like it was offline for a couple hours.
Wow.
And
So the incompetence of the other company doesn't matter.
No.
What?
Yeah.
So it was offline for a few hours and they got charged?
They got charged with multiple felonies. And part of that is, the way that the CFA defines damage is it's any impairment to, among other things, the availability of data, of program system information. So, a 5-minute denial of service attack against, my shitty email server running on like, my old 46 is CFA damage. And if I decide to hire, a like $1,000 an hour defer contractor to come find out what happened, that's going to be counted against the defendant.
That's crazy. So I mean, you occasionally will comment in funny ways on some stories and funny ways that are also true. And one of those that sticks out in recent memory is it's literally less risky to go smash out the windows of a building than to DDoS them. And it sounds like that's actually the truth. That's actually the case. Advocating doing either of those, but in the grand scheme of things, actually doing physical damage to windows or something would be less risky than DDoSing a site.
Yeah, it's a line that gets brought up a lot in CFAA reform advocacy, is just the sheer reality that, look, going and smashing a bunch of windows of some company is going to risk less serious charges, less prison time, less punishment than hacking like one Windows box of this company.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's
get your baseball bats ready.
I think it's.
That's, I think what we're trying to say here. Make sure.
Literal hacking.
Of course.
Like smash windows, don't break into windows.
Right. Yeah.
If you're interested in like a good longer read on this, there's a scholar named Molly Souter who wrote a book. I believe it's called. Wrote a book called The Coming Swarm, and its subtitle is DDoS Actions, Hacktivism, and Civil Disobedience on the Internet. And it's a really good sort of both legal focused, but also sort of policy and philosophy look at what digital protest means, and some sort of higher concept arguments about why it's just kind of ridiculous in this day and age that we punish that more harshly than anything in the real world.
I think that, if I recall, I believe I've heard of that book. It came out of the what do they call them, the PayPal 15 or 16 or
I think the PayPal 14 are mentioned in there. Yeah.
Interesting.
But it also covers things like a lot of like philosophical theories on civil disobedience, and kind of runs the whole scope between all that.
That's wild stuff.
Yeah, so we're getting towards the end here. And I wanted to bring up one more point of just ask your opinions about the defense distributed thing that we mentioned earlier. If you had any or wanted to share.
Yeah, I can share my opinions generally on the First Amendment as it relates to code as speech. Happy
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
I'm going to politely decline speaking about defense distributed specifically, as we've done some work for them in the past, and I don't want to
Yeah,
touch on
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
But I think as a legal argument, I have a very hard time pushing against the notion of code as speech. It's written work that is the product of one or more human minds. I think it's you've got decades of case law saying yes, code is among other things speech, and it's I don't think you can assail that notion without putting at risk sort of the entire foundation of the internet or software in general. Once you start pulling that out from First Amendment protection, the scope of what can and can't be legally limited in terms of what can be coded is pretty scary. I think it's I've as with many things relating to gun control, I think I've seen a lot of very emotional reactions from, in particular, state attorney general's offices on this, which I think the New York State AG posted something about how their whole point was it was crazy that criminals could easily misuse that, and the truth or falsehood of that is not really relevant. The point is that is not an argument that answers either the First or Second Amendment concerns implicated by defense distributed or any sort of sharing of dangerous ideas on paper. That is something that we've been protecting since before the founding of this country, and the fact that criminals could misuse it is not really here or there on the issue. So I don't know. I'm hopeful to see some more nuanced responses on the actual legal issues involved. So far, most of what I've seen, even out of state attorney general's offices, have been not really responsive to the legal questions that I find myself asking about it.
So if we can jump away from specifically that issue, but go back in time to something that's happened before that maybe you'd feel more comfortable commenting on. What about things like the Anarchist Cookbook that would, or the Jolly Rogers Cookbook, or any of those things that used to be around that told people how to do things that could potentially be used incorrectly, like for crime or whatever? Like, is that a similar scenario? Is that are we looking at talking about the same thing just all over again? Or I mean,
I think legally it's a very similar scenario. It's not a hard line for the law to draw between providing the information to do something versus actually doing it. And I think even before the Anarchist Cookbook, you had a case about this where someone had published the plans to make a nuclear bomb or something like that in the 70s or 80s, like zine culture. And it's the same issue where, if you actually went out and built one, there's all these laws that we already have that kick in to prevent the dangerous creation or use of these things. But merely distributing the information is First Amendment speech. Now, maybe I think the one sort of obvious exception would be if I'm publishing that information while also saying, hey, go do this criminal thing with it, please. That's a different situation. But if it's just the mere providing of information, I have a hard time seeing that as something we can just accept from First Amendment protections.
At what point does? Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
I was actually just going to ask. You said there's a fine line between the two things. So what does it become if you produce that information and also say, and go ahead and do it? Like, what does that actually mean?
So a lot of this comes down to these sort of know it when I see it kind of rulings from the court, where the most absurd examples on the extremes are the easiest to discuss, but in reality, it often ends up somewhere closer and somewhere like in the messy middle, where if I've put this information out there and said very clearly, don't do anything bad with this. It's on you if you do. This is for research purposes only. None of that is 100% legally like bulletproof, but it certainly helps. Whereas if I put that information out there and say, yeah, go do crimes, go do all of them, that's looking a whole lot like I was encouraging or part of the impetus for whatever crimes happen because of it.
Interesting. So you can actually be linked to a conspiracy charge at that point, then?
In some cases, maybe not a conspiracy charge, but
but it opens you up for potential issues of.
It certainly opens you up for potential issues.
Gotcha.
And then you've got other situations where the law will look at certain kinds of tests about the speech. So probably the most well sort of discussed example is threatening speech, where going back to the early 20th or 19th century, you've got cases talking about where do you draw the line between sort of polemic writing versus actual threats. And eventually, like in certain situations, the court will look not just at what was written in a bubble, but at the sort of the whole situation. For what you've got now in the U.S. In certain situations, it's called true threat doctrine, where if I say I'm going to come kick your ass, that doesn't really move the needle. But if I say that and describe the exact time and location and how I'm going to do it, and then like hop in my truck and drive 100 miles to find you, that probably does qualify. So the court doesn't just look at what's said; it's going to look at sort of the entire environment around what's going on.
It's interesting.
I mean, that sort of applies, I guess, to us sometimes. Like we like to have thought experiments when things come up in the news about where it could be used and what it is. Like trying to bring real infosec to what we talk about, but we always do try. Like we've got our disclaimer at the start, which I guess from what you're saying doesn't really mean shit. And
what?
We do discourage people to do cybercrime, but we have to look at we're trying to look at it from a realistic view. So I guess there's a good chance for us to say don't go do crimes after listening things we talk about. We're doing thought experiments.
Yeah, I mean those disclaimers. It's not they don't mean shit. I like to use the outrunning the bear analogy, where the important thing is not that it's this like perfectly legal protection, but it means you're not like the slowest runner out of the entire group.
Right.
I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of on this topic. I'm thinking of this recent case where someone had provided. I was some kind of like keylogger or rat or some sort of like pretty obviously malicious bit of software with like the research purposes only sort of disclaimer, but then have like only sold it on like hacking forums. Right. So that's a good example of like, the disclaimer is not quite enough if circumstances suggest otherwise.
Yeah. The other issue that our disclaimer has is it gets copyright struck by our providers, so I think it gets actually cut out of all the episodes anyways.
Amazing.
Nice.
So it's actually getting kind of late now, but I wanted to thank you, Esquiring, for coming and joining us and talking about some really important stuff here. Is there anything that you have that you want to just mention, any projects you're working on or anything you want anyone to know before we sign off for the night?
I guess let me throw an announcement and a question out there. First off, I'm going to be at B-Sides and DEF CON in, I guess, about a week. So if any of y'all are there, come say hi. I'll probably be posting about like where I'm at. And also, speaking of, thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks for coming on.
And the other thing I've been sort of kicking around is I'm really curious from the like InfoSec and research community. You know, I feel like lawyers not having a great rap in the first place. I feel like especially in tech, there's a sense of like us as the no people, as the bad news bears kind of. And I'm really curious. Feel free to message me or DM me on Twitter or send my grandma a PGP email to forward on. If there are things that like I can be offering the InfoSec community that would be more useful or more accessible than sort of the formal hire a lawyer thing. I've been in my like in this fantasy world where I have a whole bunch of free time and a whole bunch of money. I've been thinking about doing. If you've seen like the traffic ticket bot, I've been thinking of doing something similar for like a CFA risk analysis.
That's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, accessibility and a lot of people have criticisms sometimes of the lawyers that are on Twitter and engage with the community, but in my opinion, that's like something that needs to happen way more than does. There's only a handful of you guys that are willing to get in the mix, and I think it's kind of shitty that there are only a handful of you. So
yeah, I agree. But I think accessibility is tough. One of my first jobs was in a organization doing sort of access to justice work, and I see it in the InfoSec community too. You know, the upfront cost for, hey, I need a lawyer to figure this out for me is pretty high. So I'm always curious about like, folks have ideas for things that folks on my end of the legal world can be doing to sort of make that more accessible or help give people like the information they need to not get in legal trouble. I'm all for it.
So for a closing note then, I guess, is there somewhere that you would recommend straight up that you can just like to shill real quick for people who need lawyers in this space?
Yeah, I mean, come talk to Torreckland Law. We're at torreckland.com or 718-737-7264, or you can shoot me an email. PGP should be up on the key server somewhere.
That's great. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on again. This
thanks for having me.
Super
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're really doing the Lord's work out there. So.
Yeah.
Yes.
Won't say which Lord, but yeah.
Oh yeah, so thanks everybody for coming and hanging out. Thanks to or congrats to RQU for solving our puzzle. Thanks to everybody who actually did it. I didn't realize so many people would be on it. So we'll probably have something either for Sunday, if not Sunday, next Tuesday when we talk to Dash about poisoning PII and what you can do to make your online presence very confusing. So we will see you guys for Sunday, and if you're don't see us then, we'll see you next Tuesday. So,
and of course, shut the fuck up and get a lawyer.
Yes.